going back, and we spoke about this a little bit a year ago, but you talked about your beginnings and you kind of touched on this, but the influence of your mom getting you into sports, getting you excited into sports and watching it and sat in front of a TV. Talk a little bit, expand on that a little bit. That was obviously crucial moments for you in entering the profession in which you entered.
My father died when I was 5 years old. He was, according to my mother, an avid and devoted boxing fan. The very first televised sports event that my mother ever sort of guided me to watch was Sugar Ray Robinson versus Bobo Olson for the middleweight championship in 1955. She took me to a neighbor's house in Hendersonville, North Carolina, walked me down a hallway to a small guest room where there was a tiny television set sitting on top of the TV dinner tray. And she said, sit here. You're going to watch the Gillette Friday night fights with Don Dunphy. In the next 90 minutes, he'll teach you everything you need to know about boxing. The fight is Sugar Ray Robinson versus Bobo Olson. It's their second fight. I love Robinson. He moves like a dancer in the ring. It was only later that I really began to understand the impact of a woman who'd been raised in a poor Irish American family in Memphis, Tennessee in the 30s and 40s, in now living in Hendersonville, North Carolina, instructing me, her son, to sit and watch Sugar Ray Robinson because he was her favorite fighter. I didn't realize the black-white implications of that at the time, but that helped to point me toward the future when both she and I became avid Cassius Clay and Cassius Clay and later Joe Frazier fans. And the very first live prize fight I ever attended with my mother's assistance was Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston, February 25, 1964, Miami Beach, Florida. I'll never forget it. So a lot of what I have from having covered boxing in my broadcasting career, I owe to my mother for having initiated me into the experience of the sport.
And if you could pick out one or two memories from that Clay Liston fight, what's the thing that stands out to you the most? It stood out to you when you were there live. It's unbelievable, really, looking back. But what stood out to you live?
We could afford one ticket, so we could not afford two tickets. So I was the one who was privileged to get out of my mother's car and go into the arena and watch the fight. And I was more excited than I ever had been in my life. I was a great lover of Cassius Clay, everything about him, including the pushback against white racism, because I had, already learned enough growing up in the South that was not me and that was not my mom. And it was fun to have a hero whose very presence on the planet was discomfiting to some of the people we liked to see discomfited. And I remember I was seated next to a man who probably was in his 50s, but I thought of him as being ancient. I was at that moment 14. And I can remember how he guided me through some of the things that were happening in the fight, including by the third or fourth round, he was saying to me, "Oh, look, your guy is starting to put his punches together." I didn't understand at that time what it meant to put your punches together, but I began to see it right in front of me. I remember being able to see very clearly from the distance from which we were sitting when Clay opened a cut under Liston's left eye in, I think, the fourth round, and I could see blood coming out, and I was getting very excited, and the man sitting next to me said, "Go ahead, get excited. Things are looking very, very good for you here." And then the sudden realization that Clay had won when Liston stayed on his stool and didn't come out for the 7th round. It was all remarkable to me. I remember going home that night and trying to put all those memories clearly into my mind and press them as though a flower between the pages of a book, so that I would never ever lose them as long as I lived. And I haven't. I can still feel what I felt that night.
Incredible. Well, let's go to the here and now. We got a big fight Saturday night. Well, some say it would be big, others would say it's not so big, but it's fight week. It's Canelo fight week. He's fighting Berlanga in a fight that not a lot of people were clamoring for, but here we are. What are your thoughts heading into this fight?
Well, there might have been a much greater clamor for it if Berlanga had been able to continue the streak with which he began his career, 16 first-round knockouts in a row. I think most of us who are close to the sport eventually came to the conclusion that that represented more about matchmaking than about any enormous ability or skill on the part of Berlanga. He is a powerful, straight-ahead puncher, but in other areas he has shortcomings, and they've shown up in the period of time since that streak was ended. And, I think if you were to try to pick out the one quality in a fighter that's least bothersome to Canelo, it's straight ahead punching power. Canelo has as much punch resistance as anyone in boxing. And we call it a chin, but he used to be my neighbor in Del Mar, California. And I bumped into his trainer many times at the grocery store, and I ran into Canelo a few times in Del Mar, and we had some personal conversations away from the HBO scene, away from the fights. And one of the things I learned was that he was an avid horseback rider. I had grown up riding horses in Guadalajara, and through the center portion of his career, as he was building toward becoming the #1 fighter in the sport, very frequently he would ride 2.5 hours of hunter jumper training on a horse in the morning, and then go to the gym for a 3-hour boxing workout in the afternoon. And when I learned that, I asked him, how in the world can you possibly do 2.5 hours of hunter jumper horseback riding and then go to 3 hours in the gym later? And he said, well, the horseback riding is almost all lower body, and the boxing is mostly upper body. So if you think about it, it's two different sets of muscles. But to this day, for instance, when he was nailing Jaime Munguia with clean, hard shots in his last fight, and Munguia was able to nail him back with some clean, hard shots of his own, didn't bother Canelo at all. He can take a punch as well as anybody, and I'm convinced that the horseback riding has had a great deal to do with it. I've never even seen anybody knock him off balance.
Yes, he definitely has one of the strongest chins in a recent memory, up there with probably.
I call it the chin, which is a logical way to describe it. But again, I think the secret is not so much the chin as it is his legs, his lower body, his balance.
Well, I saw there was a clip the other day of him kind of doing those neck exercises, that I think Tyson used to do. I've seen Costizu do it too, where he's kind of rolling around on a towel in the middle of the ring. So yeah, he is definitely a stout man.